me. All the way.
Hello and welcome to Flix of Time, the podcast all about entertainment from the generational perspective. I'm Chris Coy.
And I'm Rae Polanco, and for this, our premiere episode, we're diving headfirst into all things Star Wars.
This is opening weekend for Rogue One, a Star Wars story, so we're excited to bring you our review and analysis of this latest installment in the Star Wars saga.
That's coming up a little bit later in the show, but first we're going to touch on just how different our experiences are when it comes to Star Wars, and how the generation gap between us creates an interesting opportunity to look at these movies through the lens of time and the perspective of age.
The kind of idea with this is that I'm from Generation X, and Rae, you're...
I'm a millennial.
Okay, so we have a pretty big age gap between us. And we find it interesting that some of the movies that, Rae, you have been discovering recently from, the 80s and so on, you're discovering them from, the perspective of someone who's right now, living with the entertainment industry the way it is, movies the way they are, and looking at it through that lens. Whereas I grew up watching these movies in theaters, and it was a really different time, just, in general, but specifically in Hollywood, the way movies were made, the climate of entertainment was very different. So we wanted to do this podcast as a way of examining the perspective of now versus back then and see what interesting things we can discover.
Right, how process. It resonates with us in different ways to see if there is a difference even.
Yeah, and of course, when you talk about looking at movies from the past that had a big impact, the first thing you think of is Star Wars, because it had a profound impact and it continues to have an even bigger impact on culture and just life in ways that... even back then when it just blew up in the 70s and 80s, it was huge, but no one really understood how much of an impact, how much of a cultural, how ingrained it would become into our culture, right? Not just pop culture, but, just it was a game changer. Yeah, absolutely. In so many ways. So, of course, we decided to start with Star Wars as our kind of launching off point in this podcast, because as we go forward, we're going to talk about, movies from my past that were very influential and movies that were very influential to you. Mm-hmm. And, but we wanted to really do kind of like the big one.
Right. It's a great model. Star Wars is probably the perfect model for this, especially because the new franchise has started up and it's interesting.
Yeah, and Disney says every year we're going to get a new Star Wars movie, so there's a lot going forward. And but first, let's talk about our experience with Star Wars in the past and how we kind of were introduced to it. So, from my perspective, I was a little kid. I was born in 1979, so my first conscious recollection of Star Wars was really Return of the Jedi. And, because I had the Ewok thing was very, cute and everything, but I didn't really understand that there was a difference between Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars.
But you thought like they were all the same movie?
Yeah, I just didn't really understand that they were episodes in a story. It was just kind of like Star Wars, lightsabers, Luke Skywalker. I remember having a Lando Calrissian toy figure, and the way that it was made looked exactly like the guy who would come do the gardening in our apartment, and so I always thought that the gardener was Lando Calrissian.
That's great.
But yeah, so coming up in the 80s, where it was just it was like the biggest thing in cinema at the time. Mm-hmm. That was my perspective. It was just kind of all around you all the time. And I probably saw Return of the Jedi in the theater. I probably saw Empire Strikes Back and A New Hope only on VHS. And it was always on, like we watched
Yeah.
it a lot. And of course I had toy lightsabers and stuff like that, but I wasn't even really worried about the movies in terms of like cinema, how good of a movie it is. As a
Hmm.
kid, you're just like, it's
Yeah.
fun. So that was really my introduction to it. I was almost born into it practically. Like it was just everywhere as soon as I was born.
That's
So
really cool.
what about you? How were you introduced to Star Wars?
So for me, it's a bit of a winding road. It started with, I know I saw Revenge of the Sith in the theaters because I was born in 1997. So Revenge of the Sith, was the last of the prequel trilogy. And I know that I was old enough to go see it in the theaters. I vaguely remember it, and I remember hating it. I hated Revenge of the Sith so
Right.
much. And so then, like a few years later, my dad had me marathon all the movies in chronological order, so it had to start with the prequels.
Hmm.
And I was over it by episode two. I was like, I can't watch these anymore. I think I watched the original trilogy, kind of like more half, because I was just bored at that point. I had gone through the three prequels that I didn't like,
Hmm.
so by the original movies, I was just like, why does it look different? I don't understand. I'm over it.
Yeah.
And then I got really into Star Trek with the new movie, Into Darkness. So Star Wars was completely off my radar. I did not know Star Wars and I didn't care for it. I was like, this is dumb. It's just lightsabers. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But then TFA came out, The Force Awakens, and my friends really wanted to see it. And I was like, well, all right, let's check it out. And I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic movie, and I still think it's a
Right.
fantastic movie. So it actually led me to rediscovering the original trilogy, and I've been a huge fan since for almost an entire year. It's just been the principal thing on my
Wow.
mind when it comes to movies.
So let me get this straight. You weren't even a Star Wars fan going into The Force Awakens.
Nope, not at all.
Wow. Okay, so you were like a long time Star Wars fan, and you were like excited about
Oh
Force
no,
Awakens, and
nope,
you go,
nope. I was like,
"Wow."
no, this is stupid.
You
I
in
don't want to
fact,
see this movie.
you in fact hated Star Wars pretty
Yep.
much. Wow. Okay.
Star Wars was the bane of my existence, and
Right.
Star Trek was king.
So Star Trek was your thing, and you kind of reluctantly went and saw The Force Awakens, and that kind of reignited your curiosity with Star Wars, and you went back and watched the original three films.
Right.
You still hate the
And I did
prequels, right?
eventually. Yeah, I rewatched the prequels just to see if I hated them as much. And yep, I do.
Right.
That's solid. But the original trilogy, what really grabbed me about The Force Awakens that made me want to look into the original trilogy was the idea of the Force and
Hmm.
how spiritual it was and that amount of depth. I was like, I did not see that in the prequels, so I need to go back and see where this came from because it's beautiful. It's a beautiful concept.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that back in the 70s and 80s people really connected, for so many different reasons. Everyone has a different reason for connecting, but a lot of people were really jazzed that there was this idea of as Han Solo called it, a hokey religion, but it was so it was so kind of true, and
Right.
the idea of a greater presence or a greater power that was kind of flowing through us all, and it kind of allowed people to draw towards that concept without being like pigeonholed into like one religion or another religion. So it did speak to a lot of people on that sense.
Right. It was in the original trilogy. It was described very vaguely, but it was perfect. By Obi-Wan in the first movie, it's just
Hmm.
it's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. I
Right.
got it. I
Yeah.
understand, and it's
Yeah.
just perfect. It's
And
beautiful.
then what did you think? Of course, when they in the prequels, they
But we don't
tried to
talk about
explain
that.
it. I know
No,
they
no,
tried to
no.
explain it with like midichlorians, and it just
Midi
kind of
chlorians.
it seemed like it kind of it invalidated what we loved about the Force.
Right, and
Because he had to explain why, how, first of all, Anakin could have been,
yeah,
immaculately conceived.
yes, Jesus.
and all that stuff. So they kind of just went like a little crazy. But we always have the originals, and hopefully you get your hands on a copy where it doesn't have all the stuff, all the crap that
Oh, I
Lucas
did. I
added.
did. When I went on my search for Star Wars after seeing The Force Awakens, I made sure to get copies that weren't the special editions because I was like, I don't like the
Hmm.
idea of having extra things. I want to go in completely unaware of the outside George Lucas trying to fix things. I just wanted to see the movie.
Right.
So I made sure to get the
Unaltered
non-special
versions.
editions. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk real quick about The Force Awakens. I know that was your kind of starting point that got you really into Star Wars. Um, Now, as a Star Wars fan, and like having grown up on Star Wars, The Force Awakens was a huge thing because when we grew up knowing that there were three movies that Lucas had made,
Hmm.
and we knew that there were three movies before it and three movies after it, and we
Right.
figured
That's
that.
what that was the plan.
Yeah, and we knew that that was what he always wanted to do, but we never thought that it would ever get done. So when
Hmm.
the prequels were announced, we were so excited. Episode one was like the biggest event ever because it was like, holy crap,
Oh
they're
yeah.
actually going to do this. And then of course they turned out to be huge disappointments. But even after that, we thought that they would never get around to making 7, 8, and 9. We
Hmm.
just thought that that was just too much, and Lucas kind of seemed like he was just
Yeah.
exhausted and done. And
Lucas, he even said in an interview there is no episode 7. It
wow,
doesn't exist. So, I mean, it must have been like, oh, okay, cool, just all right.
yeah, we just kind of just thought, okay, well that was it. So now we have the complete story of how Anakin started and how he ended, and that's good. And then of course all the stuff with Disney acquiring Lucasfilm, all that stuff happened, and we get this on the horizon that, oh my gosh, they're actually going to continue the journey into the final three, and also a bunch of side movies and all that stuff. But the
Hmm.
excitement of having the Force Awakens come was just great. I actually saw it with my best friend, for 30 years, known him since I was 8 years old. So we were just so excited to see it. Now I really loved it. Um, as you watch it, when you really think about it, there's a few things that kind of go, well, they could have done this better or that better.
I mean,
But
yeah, but the same can be said with the original trilogy too. No movie is,
oh yeah,
perfect.
right. I think J.J. Abrams had a huge burden because I
Right.
mean, you have the expectations of multiple generations of people who are just in love with it, and everyone has an opinion on how it should be. So it's almost impossible to do anything that's going to be completely well received. I mean,
Hmm.
well received. But I think he did a pretty good job, and it set up, the following movies, and so I was really excited when we saw the first trailer for Rogue One.
Mm.
It really got me going. And what's your memory of that going into Rogue
Well,
One as a
when I
trailer,
saw
just seeing that?
right when I saw The Force Awakens and I rediscovered Star Wars, they announced Rogue One, and I read the story for it, the quick synopsis that they released, and I was like, oh, so it's just the opening crawl of A New Hope. What? Okay, I wasn't really. I was like, okay, it
Really?
didn't seem like a really exciting thing for me. I was like, it's already summarized in the opening crawl, so where's the
Mm-hmm.
story?
Mm-hmm.
But then I wanted to see the trailer to see where the storytelling potential was, and when I did see it, I was like, yeah, I'm in because it
Right.
looked gritty and dirty in a way that Star Wars had never been before. It
Mm-hmm.
looked like a dogfight kind of movie with
Mm-hmm.
just people instead of the Jedi and the Force and everything. It was just this band of rebels that you've never seen before, and that seemed interesting. There was a sense of discovery there, which is
Mm-hmm.
always great in Star Wars.
Yeah, I think that when I heard that it was the story of how they got the Death Star plans, I thought that was really interesting. I never really thought of it like, oh, it's what's in the opening crawl, um, but I thought, oh, that'll be an interesting, little
Mhm.
piece of the pie, a little piece of the puzzle that we can stick in there.
I
And
was just concerned that it was going to be like a filler movie,
right,
just to fill time between
yeah,
episode 7 and 8. And I was like, I will not be, I will not be a pawn in your game, Lucasfilm. I
Right.
just want episode 8.
Right. Well, so let's go fully into our Rogue One review. First, we're gonna just talk about it a little bit briefly for people who still haven't seen it. Just for general kind of impressions and stuff, and then very quickly we're gonna go into full spoiler mode and geek out about all the stuff that's in it. So your initial, your general kind of review on it, right?
Generally, it's a fantastic movie. It's really great. The first act is kind of slow. Like, there's a lot of planet hopping that I didn't like, and I was like, I don't know where this movie is going. But when it does actually find its footing, and it starts to move quickly, and it is such a ride, and it's so much darker than any Star Wars movie that we've ever gotten, and it was so refreshing to see that.
You think it was darker than Revenge of the Sith, where you have to watch Anakin burning and and killing
I
younglings
think
and
in
stuff?
terms of actual emotional weight, I would say that Rogue One is the darkest of all the Star Wars movies because it feels more legitimate. Where with Revenge of the Sith, it was like you knew it was going to happen because you already know that Darth Vader is Darth Vader.
Right.
And you didn't really care too much about Anakin because Anakin was kind of a jerk all the time.
Right. Right.
Where with
But
these
I mean, it
people,
was
these are
so
your
graphic,
friends,
though.
Well,
Yeah,
right.
I see what you're saying. Emotionally, yeah.
It just felt like more emotionally impactful to me at least. It's shot beautifully. I love the score. I think Michael Giacchino did a great job. I highly recommend it. I think it's just a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's when I was watching it, I thought this is what Star Wars was always supposed to be. Like this is what the prequels should have been.
Absolutely.
It was, yeah, it was a little slow in parts, and when you're in the third act, or at least the end of the second act, you're like, well, there's a lot of action going on for quite a bit of time, and it kind of gets you kind of get overwhelmed for a
Mhm.
bit, but then it kind of brings it back into focus. But man, just the acting, the cinematography, everything
Oh yeah,
was just so well done,
great
and
cast.
great cast. Loved every single one of them. I didn't have any. Nothing bumped me in terms of like anyone's performance or anything like that. There were a couple things that did bump me technologically,
Oh yeah,
which was I mean, maybe I should say that, save that for the spoiler stuff, but
yeah. Maybe
um,
you're about to go a little bit spoilery.
yeah. So we'll just say if you haven't seen it, definitely go see it.
Oh yeah,
See it in the biggest format you can. Um, you saw it in 3D, right?
yeah. I saw it in IMAX 3D.
How was that?
Um, I think that Force Awakens' IMAX was a little bit better,
Hmm.
but I mean, I still felt very immersed. The
Right.
big screen, it helps make you feel like you're in the world. And when it comes to Rogue One, it's good to feel that and feel like
Hmm.
you're part of this team. So
How was
I'd
the
say see it in
3D
IMAX.
though? Like, how was
The
did the
actual
3D?
3D.
Yeah.
There wasn't that one scene where I was like, "Oh man, that's what the 3D's for."
Hmm.
But I mean, I the sound was still good and the picture quality was still good. So I'd still recommend it at least in IMAX, maybe not particularly IMAX 3D.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw it in just standard, just classic,
Mm.
2D.
Well, I
Um,
saw it in both. I saw it in 2D at another theater, and I didn't really like the theater, so
okay, yeah,
the
yeah.
quality just wasn't that good, and it wasn't the movie's fault. It was the theater.
Right. Yeah, I definitely recommend to see, go to the it's worth paying the extra money for a fancy theater,
Hmm.
you know, because it's just worth it.
Yeah, don't
Okay.
go to a theater that you know the quality's bad.
Right, right. So spoiler alert, we're giving you a warning.
Full
We're going
spoilers.
into full spoiler now. So if you haven't seen it, you can pause
Go see
this
it.
and go
Just go
see it,
see
and
it.
then you can listen to the rest of this. But
Yeah, come
okay,
back.
spoiler time. All right. So much good stuff.
Oh yeah.
As Star Wars fan, like if you're not a Star Wars fan and you're not really familiar, you'll like the movie, but
Hmm.
it won't be as you're not going to have the same level of appreciation and
That's fair. Yeah.
satisfaction as someone who's well versed in the movies and the characters and the lore and legend,
Right.
right? So I'm gonna let you start off with all the stuff you wanted to gush about.
Well, bouncing off of that, where you're like, I think if you're a Star Wars fan, you'll like it more. I do agree, because The Force Awakens is definitely a more accessible film. That's why I was able to get into Star Wars. If I
Right.
had started with Rogue One, I don't know if I would have gotten as into Star Wars. But just because it's not as accessible doesn't mean it's not good. It's actually very great. It's just a more mature movie.
Hmm.
It's not the same hero's journey story that we've seen now 7 times over.
Right.
It's about themes. It's more of a thematic movie than a character driven movie. But I do like the characters. I liked all of them. I liked Jyn Erso. I liked Cassian Andor, Chirrut Imwe, Baze Malbus. I love director Krennic. I think he's a great bad guy.
Yep.
And everybody else that we've seen before that came back, like I love seeing Mon Mothma again, and uh, even Bail Organa. Even though I didn't like the prequels, I like Jimmy Spence as
Hmm.
Bail Organa. The CG characters.
Yes, that's
How
what I was gonna touch on.
how do you feel about those?
Okay, so I thought at first that they were going to do just, for Tarkin, I thought they were going to stay on the back of his head and just kind of do a
Right.
reflection, and but he was much more involved, so they obviously couldn't have just done that kind of
Hmm.
thing. So their only option was to completely build him in CGI and have a completely computer generated character based on a guy that's no longer alive.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like I understand why they did it, and I mean it was pretty dang good.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it's like okay, we know we're watching a CGI character that's
Right.
supposed to be a real character. So that was a gutsy move. I mean, that was
I
gutsy
think so.
because
Yeah.
it could have been so bad, and I think it was right on the edge of being
Oh
like
yeah.
bad, but it was good, and you're just like, okay, I have to choose to accept that this is a person, you know?
Yeah, like I've seen a lot of movies, and I've seen a lot of movies try to do this and it not look good.
Hmm.
With Tarkin, when I first saw him, I was like, "Oh my God, is that no? Peter Cushing is dead. How is this real?" I was really freaking out for like 20 seconds. I was just like,
Really?
"How is this real? How is this happening?" And then I was like, "Oh, okay, it's CGI. Calm down."
Right.
But
Yeah.
But for a second there, I was fully immersed, and I was like, "Oh my God, Lucasfilm just brought a man back to life."
Hmm. Yeah.
I think it's the best I've ever seen this kind of technology. It's
Hmm.
scary. Same with Leia. I think Leia looked even better.
Yeah, Leia, man, it's just so hard because, we're looking for it.
Yeah.
We know these people aren't, you can't go back in time and bring back Carrie Fisher to the future and shoot it and send her back. So you have to do the CGI. And that's why video games, the whole uncanny valley, when you're talking about
Right.
mimicking the look of a real human being, it is very hard.
Yep.
And I think they did as good as they possibly could, given that these characters. Because I mean, if you look at Terminator,
Yeah.
the recent Terminators where
Yeah.
they CGI'd, so Terminator Genesis, and then I think they did it in the Christian Bale one too. Um,
They did it in Tron.
Oh yeah, Tron was I think a miss. I think Tron was a
Yeah.
miss. And they
I
did
didn't
the
like
best that they
Terminator
could.
Genesis either.
Well, as I mean, that's a different episode. we're gonna do a different episode on that one. But as far as the CGI of young Arnold Schwarzenegger, they did amazing. But he didn't talk.
Yeah.
You know, um, this movie did so well because Tarkin especially had so many lines throughout the movie,
Yeah.
and it was still like, wow, he's mingling with these other real life characters that are being actually shot by the
Hmm.
camera, and it was good enough for me to go, okay, I accept this. I'm moving on. I'm letting it go. I'm not gonna like nitpick it because it's so dang good,
Right.
even if it
You
has
can see
moments.
that amount of respect and effort that they put into it. It's like,
Mhm.
wow, that must have been like months of work.
Oh, painstaking, yeah. So that was cool. So let's talk real quick, just from the beginning. the thing about Rogue One that immediately impressed me was that, it was the deliberate choice to break from convention
Yes.
from, the very first frame after they put up a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away,
Hmm.
um,
No crawl.
by not having the da 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 da,
Yep.
and no crawl. So they're
I think it was so
immediately,
smart.
yeah, from frame one, they're immediately telling you this is different. Don't hate us. Like we're not trying to be the other ones, so just go with us, right?
Hmm.
And you mentioned before how in the beginning you were kind of like there's a lot of planet hopping.
Hmm.
The fact that they superimposed the names of the locations every time
Hmm.
they jumped to a different, I was like, okay, that's something we've never seen before. They never did that in any of the Star
Right.
Wars because it's just that just wasn't the convention, right? So by them doing that, it's like, okay, cool, I know where we're at. So the planet hopping to me didn't really it wasn't too much because they were telling me exactly where I was, so I could follow along.
I just always felt like naming the planet. It's what I actually liked about Star Wars. I didn't like how they actually named the planets in this movie, just because I don't see it as being relevant. I
Hmm.
think that having it announced through dialogue, just the
Hmm.
characters talking, is a little bit better. Like, I knew Scarif, and I still know Scarif because everybody was talking about Scarif. I know
Right.
what Scarif is.
Right.
With the penal colony, I think it was called Wabani.
Hmm.
Why did I need to know the name of that planet?
Right.
I mean, I know that the script probably has a name for it, so
Hmm.
someone will get it and it will be put up on Wikipedia. But that's
Right.
it. That's all. Like, if I really needed to know, I could find it myself, but it's not necessary for the story. So I
Right.
didn't really see a point, and I never do in these movies. It's like,
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
more of it's kind of a convention in science fiction or military, any type of like
Right,
military
right.
action movie like
I took it like
CIA
that, yeah.
Langley, yeah. And I didn't mind it. I mean, I think that's one of the, I think we'll have to agree to disagree, but I thought it for me it helped, even though it did bump me for a second, going, oh wow, they've never done that before. But I was like, okay, cool, I
Yeah.
know what's going on. Now the
But yeah,
cinematography,
no, it's, pardon?
I was gonna say the cinematography, kind of switching gears,
Mhm.
because you're a big cinematography, like you like to address the cinematography like pretty heavily. What were your thoughts on how this was shot?
I thought it was beautiful. I think it's just a very beautifully shot movie. I think what Gareth Edwards did with his DP, I can't remember his name right now, um, but I think it was great. When I think about the other Star Wars movies, it doesn't look like a Star Wars movie. It looks visually distinct, um,
Hmm.
and not in a bad way, like the prequels where everything looks really artificial.
Yeah.
It looks it looks gritty, but like it also is very grounded, where
Hmm.
most Star Wars movies, they have that epic quality where you have like a lot of wide takes and like you have a lot of characters in one frame at one time. With
Hmm.
Rogue One, it's you're on the ground and occasionally they'll pan up or they'll do a wide shot where they show you the scale, but then
Yeah.
you're right back
Yeah.
because they really showed the large hand of the Empire over this like basically insignificant rebellion. It made the
Right.
Empire feel so big and the rebels feel so small. And that cinematography, that great cinematography, really added to that. I think without that visual storytelling, the the emphasis, it really wouldn't have been driven home in the same
Hmm.
way. I think in the hands of a lesser director and a lesser cinematographer, it wouldn't have been as impactful.
Right. Yeah, the cinematography seemed to stay true to the classic Star Wars movies, um, yet it incorporated the beautiful, dazzling clarity of modern cameras and visual effects and all this. And what I loved, like you said, it was gritty. Um, I thought it was like it was a perfect blend of gritty
Mm,
and clean.
right.
Um, and like you said, the scope of what they did, what they were able to do with the weight of large objects, just how they portrayed the scope of these large objects, like the Star Destroyer hanging up,
Yeah.
over the plateau. Um, it just
Just the
seemed
the space
so
battle,
real.
you could see size better than ever.
Yeah, like when the Star Destroyer crashes into the other Star Destroyer, it was
Yes.
like, okay, that looks absolutely real.
Oh yeah, and
You know?
I loved how dirty it looked. Like
Hmm.
it was so dirty and gritty. Those space battles were awesome in this movie
Hmm.
because you understand what's going on. You know that the Corvette crashed into
Right.
the Star Destroyer because it was disabled, and then it crashed into the other one so that it could fall and disable the shield. It just made sense. There were logical transitions. It all added up in your brain. Whereas there have been other battles in past Star Wars movies, the prequels, where you're like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
I don't feel invested in anything.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think it was beautifully mixed cinematography, CGI. Just it was amazing. Um, Along with that, as far as directing, I wasn't really familiar with the director, um, Gareth Edwards,
Hmm.
and you were kind of apprehensive when you saw what
Yeah.
he previously did.
Yeah, so I saw Godzilla from, I think it was 2014, and I was very disappointed in it because I thought it was going to be more intense and like emotional, and that's just not what I got. I got a very boring movie to me. I didn't think the actors acted well, even Bryan Cranston. It didn't feel like his A game. And when you're a director, it's your job to get those kinds of performances out of your actors. And I didn't feel that. I did understand how good Gareth Edwards was with scale, so that was exciting. I knew that the
Mhm.
Empire was going to feel really big, but I was concerned that the actors wouldn't deliver in Rogue One because I don't think Gareth Edwards is necessarily an actor's director.
Right.
But I was wrong. I think the actors did a great job, all of them. I think they made their characters, and their subtle movements really brought home their emotional standpoints and their motivations, which was it was great. I was very impressed. So good job directing Gareth Edwards.
Yeah, and I think that you have directors that are very actor oriented. They're
Like J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, and you have those directors that actors are like, I love working with this director because they really understand the acting, and a lot of times those directors are very kind of hands off on
Mm-hmm.
the technical side, the cinematography side. They kind of like let the cinematographer do his job and just kind of consult. And then you have directors that are very technical. They're hands on with the camera and the
Right.
cinematography, and they're kind of hands off with the actors. They kind of give uh, broader,
Like George
uh,
Lucas was.
yeah. Um, and then rarely do you have someone that can do both really, really well. Like J.J. Abrams is
Mm-hmm.
very technical, very smart, and he's really good with actors. I feel that uh, Gareth Edwards, what he brought, because his cast is great. So even if he literally did nothing, I
Right.
think his actors
Oh
would
yeah.
have
I mean, all
delivered
these actors
amazing performances.
have great filmographies. Like Felicity Jones, I think she's been
Yep.
nominated for an Oscar, right? Diego Luna, I love his work. Alan Tudyk is always fantastic. Donnie Yen is a beast. Wen
Hmm.
Zhang, Ben Mendelsohn, Forrest Whitaker, like really,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
these people aren't going to give bad performances.
Right.
But I mean, they brought their A game. Like it
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
even like phoned in good. It was just really good.
Yeah. So I think what Gareth Edwards brought was what a Star Wars fan would put on screen if J.J. Abrams was a Star Wars fan, but he was also under a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations
Right, because it
for
was an
it to be a
episodic
certain thing.
movie.
Yeah, and then I think this director had the ability to go outside the box and be like, okay, I'm going to make a really good Star Wars movie, but because there's no expectation of like the main central characters from the trilogies before, he could do a lot of stuff and have room to just make a good movie. And I think he balanced that really well. He balanced the the technical issues, making everything technically beautiful,
Mhm.
um, CGI, all that stuff. He balanced just kind of overall culturally what a Star Wars movie should feel like.
Yes.
I think he did really good at bringing what a Star Wars movie should feel like and look like, without having to be kind of pigeonholed into this is what Star Wars is always,
Right.
opening thing, Star Wars, the crawl into space, all that stuff. So he was really able to stay true to what
Hmm.
I think the essence of the original three films is.
Right, and it was really difficult to do that, and I'm so glad that they were able to pull it off. It does feel like a Star Wars movie,
Yep.
but it also has the weight that we haven't had in Star Wars movies, that weight of consequence and that weight
Hmm.
of sort of mortality that you didn't expect in your main heroes. Like the main
Yeah.
heroes, their their mortality is very much on your mind the entire movie. You're like, are they
Hmm.
going to die? Because, I mean, they're up against a threat that is immeasurable,
Hmm.
So that kind of weight has never really been in Star Wars. I was never concerned
Hmm.
about, in the original trilogy at least, I was never concerned about Luke Skywalker dying, Princess
Hmm.
Leia, or Han Solo. I knew that they were safe, but with
Right.
Rogue One, I was like, I'm really worried for you guys because I feel like I'm part of your team.
Yeah.
And I love that you guys are so into this cause. And, well,
And especially because we know that, from A New Hope, she says a lot. She says a lot of Bothans died. Is that what she says?
oh no, that was in Return of the Jedi.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, when they steal the Death Star plans again in Return of the Jedi, many Bothans died to bring us this
Oh,
information.
okay.
When
Wow.
Mon Mothma actually first shows up in Jedi, yeah.
Wow. You bested me in my knowledge.
Ha.
Ha.
Everybody's like, "Where are the Bothans?" I'm like, "They ain't there yet. Wait for
Yeah,
Rogue Two."
I literally came out going, what is a Bothan?
Ha.
And why have we not seen him? Anyway, but the what I wanted to ask you is, because you have this great director and cinematographer, and everything's, you know, really dialed in, but we haven't really looked at the writing,
Mm.
because the writing had a unique challenge. How do you make us care about characters that are ancillary, have nothing to do with,
Hmm.
Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, all that stuff? That you do have the side characters that are integral to the other movies, like Tarkin and all that stuff. But how do you go into telling a story and getting us to care about this story, even though it's related to the things that we love, doing that in a way where we're really emotionally invested, which I think the writing did, um, and not make it sound like an unrelated science fiction movie.
Right.
You
That's
know?
really the whole thing. And I think what they did was they made sure to keep the themes consistent. The themes of all the Star Wars movies have been consistent, including with Rogue One. The theme of hope and
Mm,
right triumphing over wrong, always doing the right thing when you can.
mm,
And that is essentially Rogue One is essentially the one that takes those themes and wears them like a badge more than probably any of the movies because
yeah.
that's all you really got. You don't have Jedi, you don't have lightsabers, you
Hmm.
don't even particularly have characters that you're going to be able to follow for future movies. So you really have to up the thematic
Yeah.
elements, which I thought was so smart for them to do. It's
Yeah.
good to have an ensemble cast that you care about all the characters, but sometimes it's just not going to happen. And in a Star Wars movie that has pacing that's really, really fast, you can't really flesh out every character perfectly, and they didn't. I think Riz Ahmed's character, Bodhi, didn't really get a lot of backstory. I think Chirrut and Baze didn't really get a lot of backstory, but I
Hmm.
understood them. I understood them enough,
Yeah.
and I understood Cassian and Jin the most. And because they were the leads, it was good to have them as an anchor.
Hmm.
But the real anchor was the themes, and having those themes to hang on to yourself, and knowing that these characters believed in these themes too. It's what gave the movie that emotional center, which was so
Yeah.
brilliant to me.
Yeah. I thought that the writing it in, so I think, and I don't know if the writers did this deliberately, but there was a point somewhere in the middle of the movie where I start, or as they started to kind of like go in into their mission, really, like, okay, this is it, we're going in, and the stakes are high. There was a point where I thought, is is she going to survive this? Are we going to see her in in future movies? Like, I actually had to question whether or not,
Mm-hmm.
the stake. It wasn't that I didn't believe the stakes. It was whether or not, you know Felicity was good enough for them to like spare so that they can use her again in another movie.
Right,
But
because they did really develop her character. The movie starts with her as a
yeah,
little girl, so you're like, are they going to develop this character just to, kill her?
right.
And it just didn't make sense, especially from a franchise standpoint. And I think it was very brave, just straight murdering all these characters. I
Oh
was like,
yeah, I mean it was
wow.
one of the best things ever to be like, okay, we're watching a movie where everyone we care about is completely going to die.
And
Like,
they did it in such a beautiful way. It was
yes,
so tasteful. It wasn't like really gory because it's still
yeah,
PG-13. It's still Star Wars, so you have to have that sort of beauty in the face of death. And I think they did it really well.
yeah, superbly. It reminded me, especially the beach scene where you're
Yeah,
watching them hug and the kind of the blast is coming and just envelops them. Did you ever see Pompeii?
I did not. Did you?
Yes, I did.
Oh
Because
man,
yeah, I definitely saw it.
was it
And
actually good?
uh, it was it was it was
Oh,
there were it was like I didn't hate it and I didn't love it, but I liked a lot of parts of it. But since you haven't seen it, are you going to see it ever?
Pompeii. It was not on my list.
So, I mean, obviously, in Pompeii, it's a story about a city or a town that
Right. No,
was
I know the
destroyed.
story of
Yeah.
Pompeii. Yeah.
But I'm saying like that was this like how do you tell a
Oh
story
yeah.
where everyone's gonna die, and how
You
do
make it
you
epic.
yeah you make it epic, but how do you tell like why are we if we know everyone's gonna die, then what's the point of investing? But I think what they did was they created this love story, and that was why we cared because the we knew we were wondering, are these two people that are in love with each other going to
Right.
escape? And they didn't. And the way that the last image of the film was so amazing because basically they show these two lovers in their last embrace encased in ash, like basically like the Pompeii people
Yeah.
that you've seen. So I thought it was a very poignant way to tell that, and the way that they ended Jin Urso and what's his name?
Cassian.
Yeah, how they ended that was very similar in terms of like, okay, this is our last embrace. Um, it was moving.
And what I thought was really nice about the ending for them was that it wasn't really centered in romantic love. It
Yeah,
was more just like you were my comrade,
right,
and in this last moment, we're just gonna comfort each other. I thought that was
absolutely.
just so great. I was like, this isn't about sexual love. It's not about romance. So it in
Yeah, they
another
didn't
way
kiss.
that it
You know.
yeah another way that it deviates so much from the epic space opera that we've seen is it wasn't about romantic love. It wasn't as simple as that. It was way more complex in that it was just two people who had been through hell together and they were about to end it. So for that
Yeah,
last moment, they were just going to be comfortable. And that was just really nice
yeah.
for a
Um,
death.
right. And oh my gosh, speaking of death, can we talk about how heartbreaking the death of the robot was? I forget his.
K2, yes. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I
Oh
I was
man.
not only surprised, I was like, no, don't kill him. He's
Yeah, like you
awesome. He's
can't
like
kill K2SO.
he's so funny, and I was really hoping he wouldn't really die, because I wanted to see more of him. But this is the type of movie it is. Everyone dies,
Everyone died.
and the fact that they made us go, oh no, don't kill it. Like he's a robot,
Yeah.
and we were so emotionally invested in him and in all the characters that even the robot dying was hard.
That was the thing that also helped it feel more Star Warsy, and that the robot character had a real personality.
Yeah.
Because the droids are supposed to feel like people. So when they
Hmm.
don't, you know that it's either Imperial or it's just not Star Wars.
Right.
You just don't
Yeah.
care. With K2, I really cared. It was very sad when he died. When he said goodbye and he locked the door to
Yeah.
protect them, I was like, that's really great. Man, I love these characters.
Yeah, it's so well done. And then one final little filmmaking thing before we have our kind of geek out session about the end of the
Right.
movie is
Oh,
the editing. The editing.
editing.
So, okay, and this is going to bring up a whole conversation because you have a theory. But before you go into your theory, I'm going to say that the editing was transparent to me. Like, I didn't think once about the editing, which is exactly what editing should be. If someone is thinking about, oh, that was a cool cut or a cool sequence, editing wise, then they're not really doing their job, because the editing is supposed to completely be transparent, so that you can,
Yeah,
so that
it's
you
supposed
don't
to be
think
smooth.
about that. Yeah, and you want to ingest the movie, the story, not the technique of cutting the movie together. So I think it was great because I didn't once think about it.
For me, I thought the editing was kind of choppy, especially at the beginning. Because one, because of the planet hopping, and two, because it felt like they were trying to establish all these characters at once, and it
Mm-hmm.
reminded me a lot of the first act of Suicide Squad, which is not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like it was just going through motions and not really ending anywhere. Like they were going from Jin to Cassian to Bodhi to back to Jin, and I was like, where is the story going? And there was even a scene in there that didn't really make any sense as to why it was still in there. I think it was just because they didn't do a reshoot with Riz
Which
Ahmed.
one?
It was the scene where Forrest Whitaker's character Saw Gerrera takes Bodhi and he puts him in this cage with this tentacle beast thing to
Uh
make
huh.
him tell the truth,
Oh
and
yeah.
that whole scene was so unnecessary and so did not feel like Star Wars to me,
Yeah.
and it did not make sense. And I think that the reason why they kept it in there wasn't because it was so essential, but because afterward he's like kind of disoriented, and I
Yeah.
guess they didn't do a reshoot for him, so they're like, crap, we have to figure out how to make him feel disoriented.
Right.
I
Yeah,
think they
because
could
they
have done it
said,
better, but
yeah, they said the side effect was that you go mad, that you go insane, you lose
I
your
guess only
mind.
for like 5 seconds.
Right.
I mean, they
Well,
figured it
and
out pretty fast. I'm the
they,
pilot. Gotcha.
yeah, exactly. They kind of tried to explain it away by like giving him you know, kind of like a center to bring his mind back into focus. But overall, the editing, especially as it picked up in the second half of the movie, was was great.
Oh
I
yeah,
thought.
no. By the mid second act to the last part, I was like, this is really good.
Hmm.
Wow, this is a lot happening, but I get it all. It didn't feel disoriented. It didn't feel
Hmm.
disorienting when you're hopping back and forth eventually. Like after that first act and they get on board and you figure out where
Hmm.
they're going, then it's perfect. The editing is perfect. And
Right.
I feel like Tony Gilroy helped out a lot after the reshoots, and maybe he helped editing. But the first act was very choppy, and then after that, it's like so smooth and such a great ride.
Okay, so let me hear this theory you have.
Yes, I have a theory that there
Okay.
are two versions of this movie.
Okay.
Because I noticed in the trailers that there are a lot of shots that simply are not there
Hmm.
in the final movie, which isn't rare. It happens
Right.
all the time. But I know that
Right.
the reshoots were extensive. I know that Tony Gilroy worked really hard on them for a long time, and I noticed a few shots where I was just so confused. I was like, where would this shot fit into the movie? And
Hmm.
I think the answer is that it doesn't, because I think there is a version where at least Jin Urso lives,
Hmm.
or maybe they all live. And then there was this version that we got where they all die. I
Well,
think
but
there were
see,
actually two versions of this movie.
okay, so that's definitely a possibility, and I want to touch on the specific things in the first
Especially because you
trailer.
see them in the trailer on the
Yeah.
beach, and I'm like, how would they get on the beach? Like running and shooting at the ATACT, and I'm like,
Mm.
where does that fit in?
So one of the things that I noticed was that in the first trailer, Forrest Whitaker is bald, and he
Yeah,
says a
why would
lot of
he be
lines.
talking to the young Jin Urso like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, and he has very specific lines. And then the next trailer, he's got the gray hair and the kind of nappy, froey look
Right,
with the
he's older,
beard.
Saw Gerrera.
Yeah, and so, oh, and then another thing is, did you notice that the scene where Jin is brought in and is kind of being
Oh, that
uh,
scene changed like every
yeah,
trailer and then changed in
the
the final movie.
the voice that says all the things that she's been caught for and all this stuff, that sounded like the guy that played Commodore, the Commodore in Pirates of the Caribbean. And then when you watch the actual movie, it's a completely different voice, completely different uh, um, accent, and
I
it's
didn't
like,
catch
wait,
that.
why is this guy speaking this line when it was clearly another person speaking this
And
line?
like little things like that, I understand. You know, they sometimes make scenes just for trailers and whatnot.
Mhm.
But I saw in many like production videos and like when the cast was talking about it, they were talking about this beach fight, and you saw images from it in the trailer,
Right,
and it
right.
looks like they were all on the beach at the same time, which does not add up if these
Yeah,
characters all go the same way that they do in the final product. So I think
right.
either Jin was supposed to live. I heard somewhere that she was had like a two picture deal even. So I was
Mm,
like, oh, okay. So I think either Jin was supposed to live and everyone else died, or they all lived and then there was the version where they all died. And if that is the case, then I give them major risk points for
right.
choosing the latter
Hmm.
because I loved this ending. I thought it was
Yeah.
perfect. I thought it was brilliant to kill them all.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Because you
And
feel the
I and
sacrifice, you know?
and I cannot wait to get my copy of the Blu-ray because I
Oh
want to
yeah.
watch all those extra features, all those deleted scenes, and really see what happened in production to make
Yeah.
them do all this stuff.
The deleted scenes for this are going to be interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so now, kind of bringing it home here, let's talk about the end of this movie was
The great
probably
end.
oh, the end of this movie was probably the most exhilarating couple of
Yes.
minutes that I have had in a theater or in any type of movie experience in a very,
Yep.
very long time, possibly ever. I was sitting there, I had my jacket on my lap, and when Darth Vader shows up on the ship and
Yep.
his lightsaber comes out and he just starts just destroying
It's
everybody.
so scary, right?
It
Like he's
was
just
like,
mowing down these rebels. I'm like, oh my god.
yeah, and like you didn't expect that because I thought that they were good, that his scene, his one and only scene as a cameo, was in the middle, and we saw it, and I thought that was it.
Right.
I thought like
Don't
we had
choke on your aspirations,
right,
director.
and we do. I do have to talk about um, Darth Vader's body performance. You know, the person in the suit.
Oh yeah.
Um, but let me go back to geeking out. When that happened and Darth Vader's just like ripping it up, and it was just the last few minutes when it's showing you how everything led
Yeah.
to the beginning of A New Hope.
Freaky. The
It,
music was the same, like it was the same
oh
track, and I was like,
yeah,
oh my god, this is scary.
and they just put all the pieces together in such a rapid, like all in the last few minutes. And I mean, I had to bring my jacket up to my mouth, and I was screaming into my jacket as Darth Vader is just doing his thing because I just didn't expect to see Darth Vader. I didn't expect to see Darth Vader kicking ass like
Oh
that
yeah.
because you know,
Just using the force and then using the lightsaber at the same time, like
oh,
it was like, oh man, that's
beautiful,
what I want to see. But it's also really
exactly,
bad. Like I shouldn't be
right.
rooting for him, and I'm not. But oh my god.
But it was so satisfying as a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
And then rapidly, like right after that, back to back things of like, okay, you know this from A New Hope, you know this, and it's all leading to that one moment where we see Princess Leia, and then the ship comes out, you know, the
Hmm.
her
Oh
smaller
man,
ship
that
comes
was
out,
so great.
and it's like, oh my god, this is so fantastic. Like it just gave me chills. Everyone was cheering. It was the most satisfying experience in a movie that I've
Yeah.
had in a long time.
Like this movie did a lot of close calls where it's like, oh my god, are they gonna make it? And that last one was so good and so satisfying. Where
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called Tantive 4, Leia's ship, when it falls out, and you're like, oh man, they made it,
Yeah.
and you see Darth Vader just standing there, like,
Oh, so great.
man, we gotta go get that ship, and
Now,
it
the
like pings away.
one of the other little Easter eggs that
There were
you
tons of
mentioned.
Easter eggs.
Yeah, you mentioned that you know the Jimmy Smits character, um, you weren't thrilled about it. Is that what you
Oh
said?
no, I like Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa. I
Hmm.
don't like the prequels, but I like Jimmy Smits. And
Hmm.
just like how I like what's his name is Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. I think he did great.
Hmm.
I liked Bail Organa, and I liked him in this movie. I think it actually made sense. I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, you
Yeah,
needed to
and they
send for Obi-Wan, so you got your daughter to do it, but then she wound
yep,
up getting the plans. That's really neat.
yeah, and I thought they gave nice little I forget what the moment was, but he said a line where I just went like out loud in the theater. I was like, hmm. You know, it was just like you know what he's talking about, and you know where it's leading, and it was just they did all these
Oh, when
little
he needs to
things
go back
throughout
to
the.
Alderaan.
Yeah, And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, yep,
I was like,
we know what
oh.
happens there. But I just wanted to touch real quick on the Darth Vader. In his scene in the middle of the movie where he's talking to what's his name? The
Krennic.
yes, I felt. I mean, first of all, um, the voice of Darth Vader. Thank God that James Earl Jones is still alive because that was
Yes.
so great to hear Darth Vader, the real Darth Vader's voice, just you know, in true fashion. But I felt that the guy in the suit didn't move how Darth Vader is supposed to move. He in fact did things that were so out of character, just and they're minor things like just nuances in his movement that it was like, well, I'm really not watching Darth Vader. I'm watching some guy pretending to be Darth Vader. And like for instance, when he walks past the other actor, the way he pivots and the way he moves around him is not it's not a movement that I think the original guy
I
that
feel
played
like I'm
Darth Vader.
picking up on what you're saying because I remember
Hmm.
watching the scene because I've seen it twice. I remember watching the scene again and I was like, "There's something off here,"
Yeah,
and
and it's
maybe it was
also
that
the
it was the
costume.
way that he held his hand. It was very good from like a framing perspective. I was like, "Oh,
Hmm.
that's really nice how he's holding his hand," but I was like,
Hmm.
"Vader doesn't hold his hand like that." I've never once seen him do it like that. But it
He
was
had the
cool
little
because
two
he
finger
turns
thing.
around. Yeah. But yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think when it comes to bringing back a character that we haven't seen on screen for so many years,
Hmm.
I think they did a pretty good job. I know that they got the chest plate right,
Hmm.
in terms of continuity, but I, and this
The
is like a
helmet.
fan thing. The helmet, yes.
Yeah,
So like
I liked.
they got the eyes right, but the
Yes,
actual
exactly.
helmet did not look like that in A New Hope, and I was like,
Yeah,
I guess it wouldn't look good on screen, but come on, it was kind
it
of
seemed
paper
like
mache
it didn't.
like.
Yeah, yeah, it seemed like it didn't. It also didn't fit. Like it didn't fit right. It didn't rest on
Like
his
it
neck.
wasn't the right size.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I
yeah.
think it was because, I think we've gotten really used to David Prowse in the suit. So,
Hmm.
and his body is kind of a hard one to find a replicant for.
Right,
I,
right.
I think they got a tall person to do it who was
Hmm.
built, but not necessarily built like David Prowse. I think
Hmm.
maybe that's the problem, and
Yeah,
maybe the head shape was different. I don't know,
yeah.
but I get what you're saying. But did I get excited when
Oh
at
yeah,
the end with Darth Vader? Yep, that's Darth Vader. Got you. Okay,
yep,
cool.
yeah. That was
I'm in.
fantastic.
And I like the
So
"Don't
yeah,
choke on your aspirations" line. I know that it's kind of cheesy, but I dig it.
no, but that's great. That was a great line. So yeah, I mean I can't wait to see it again because I just ugh.
Oh man, after I record this, I'm seeing it again.
You just saw it last night
I did.
for the
I saw
second time.
Force Awakens like 5 times, so in the theater.
Wow.
And then
Can
when I
I
got the home release, I was like, oh man.
can I tell you something that I'm not proud to admit? I saw episode 1 in the
Oh
theaters
no. Oh god.
10 times.
Oh my god, you didn't.
I did. I saw it
Oh.
10 times, but that was mostly because I was young and I was excited about this new,
Now
frontier and
this
I
is
was really
pod racing.
I'm sorry. But listen, I have to say the reason really was Natalie Portman because I was kind of
Oh.
obsessed with Natalie Portman. I had a huge crush on her. So I saw it because it was like, you know, that's the only way you can see it. So I saw it a lot. And then once I got to about 7 or 8, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for the 10. And by the ninth and 10th time, I was like, okay, I'm over this. I'm really done. I'm
I
totally
can't do it
done.
anymore. I feel dirty.
Yeah. Not even that. It was just like I started to realize this is actually a bad movie.
Oh, you just started to realize at the 10th viewing?
Yeah, yeah, because here's the thing. I was so excited. The
Mm,
excitement about having a new Star Wars.
right.
That's how long it lasted. Like that's how long it and I know a lot of people that had that same thing.
Yeah.
It was like so exciting that it even existed that we kind of were willing to overlook the quality of it, at least, out loud. Maybe subconsciously we had a different like, oh, this is kind of bad, but I still love it. It's Star Wars. Woohoo.
Well, you're not the only person I've heard that from. I hear often that everybody was like, I didn't get it the first time.
Yeah.
I did not get it the first time. A lot of people
Yeah.
were like, maybe if I see it again, I'll see the true beauty of it. And it's George Lucas, so it has to be great, right?
Hmm.
And boy, You know?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so this movie, Rogue One, legitimately amazing.
Yeah,
No
legitimately
matter how
good
many times you
prequel
see it.
movie.
Yeah,
It's like that's what you need.
absolutely. So for all of you that haven't seen it, if you listened all the way through all those spoilers, you really got to go see it. And if you have seen it, go see it again. Right?
Yes, absolutely. See
Okay,
it multiple
so
times and pick up all the Easter eggs because there are a lot of them. If you're
there
a
are
Star
so
Wars
many.
Rebels fan, even though I watch Star Wars Rebels just
Uh
to
huh.
fill in the void that
Right.
when there are feature films coming out, I need to watch Rebels.
Right.
There are two Rebels references that I saw and heard. So if you
Really.
find more, go ahead, let me know.
Hmm.
Because I need
Yeah.
I need some kind of reassurance to continue to watch the show.
Yeah. Totally. So let's wrap it up. We're going to definitely be doing more podcast episodes covering things like the Indiana Jones trilogy, Back to the Future, um, several other options that we're still working
Indiana
on.
Jones, we definitely need to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's going to be really fun. If as a listener, if you're out there and you are a parent that uh, loves to show your kids movies that you grew up on and love and are used to getting the oh come on again we have to and this is what this podcast is for. It's taking a really cool look at things that one generation has grown up on and loves and cherishes and maybe even was life changing. Some movies come along and right at the right time in your life and they really do a number on you. So those are some things that I like to explore. I have a stepdaughter and I love showing her movies. But now I get to talk about the film stuff, the actual cinema stuff with you, Ray, because you're a movie reviewer. You do great reviews. You have a really
Oh,
good
thanks.
knack for analyzing things and writing it out. So it's really fun to explore these things and talk about the cinema, talk about the geek part, talk about all that stuff, and really have a good look at the difference between my generation and your generation and how we view things from opposite ends of the spectrum.
And I think Rogue One is a really interesting piece uh, to really bring that up because it's like the old Star Wars movies are fantastic and it still resonates with people today because they are timeless tales. The hero's journey is a story that resonates with all of us. But it's interesting that Rogue One coming out now that's supposed to appeal to people my age, 19 millennials.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that this is the movie that they thought would resonate with people my age, the darker one, the one where there's shades of gray in the morality complex. It's not black and white anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I find it really interesting that they decided to make this darker movie for this year.
Yeah.
I think because when you think about 1977 Star Wars, it's very it's very black and white because in the 70s there was a lot of movies about the anti-hero, so people
Mm-hmm.
were over that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think now we're coming into a time where we have so many movies about heroes, and maybe we want a few more anti-heroes, maybe we want more gray morality. And
Right.
I'm curious to see if Rogue One will start a trend and maybe make more movies about heroes that don't always do the right thing. Maybe the ends justify the means, maybe they don't. I think that will be really interesting to see in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I
And
wonder,
so
how other people in our age group, our different age groups, like feel about this new movie and versus the old movies.
yeah, and if you're listening to this podcast and you want to comment, we do have we have social media accounts for um, this podcast and also for ourselves individually. Ray, what's your Instagram?
My Instagram handle is Ray_Ray217, and that would be in the description too. And I also have a creators.co account where if you go to creators.co/at Ray's reviews, all of my full reviews will be at that link. All of my full written reviews, you know.
Yep. And this podcast has an Instagram, Flix of Time podcast, and you can check us out there. My Instagram account is Thinquarium, and that's my entertainment production company. That's where I do most of my Instagramming. So yeah, definitely if you want to chime in, leave us a comment, send us your reviews, send us your thoughts on movies, suggestions for episodes in the future. We'd love to hear what you think, and let us know how we're doing.
Yeah, leave your comments below. Check us out on our other social media accounts. Leave comments there. We'd love to hear from you. It's really about interaction. It's about having the conversation.
Absolutely. So until next time, this is Chris Coy, and
And Rae Polanco.
we're signing off. This has been the first episode of Flix of Time. Thank you.
Thanks.